Perfect.
Hey, Jennifer. Good to have you here today. We'll try to keep this pretty dynamic, so we'll engage with the chat and the questions throughout the conversation.
Perfect. Hey, Kira. Awesome. Yeah, we can give it a few minutes. I know one's always like you're running from another meeting or lunch or whatnot. So we'll just give you a few minutes to come on in. But if you're just joining us, if you want to put in the chat what organization you are here with and joining on behalf of, would love to see who all we have here so far.
Yeah, I feel like August 13th, middle of the day, you got the summertime here.
Yep, exactly.
People are taking vacations, but also thinking, how do I get ready for year end? So this will be a great
Exactly.
conversation.
Hey, Sandra.
The chart team task force. Sandra, what does the chart team task force do? You can put it in the chat. So you get some sometimes I wonder about doing these as actually like a just an open Zoom meeting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
We can actually just chat and whatnot.
I
It'll be
know.
a little bit more, all the conferences were
Interactive.
face to face. It's so much easier to see who's there and kind of
Yeah,
fill in. But Zoom makes this a lot easier to do, I guess, from home and
for
all around
sure.
the country. Goals are decrease teen births and SEDs in teen. That's great. It's important stuff there.
Yeah. Awesome. Maybe you want to give it like 2 more minutes and then we can go ahead
Yeah.
jump into things, just some intros and stuff. That works.
Maybe we start with some introductions while
Yeah.
that last couple of people start rolling in.
Perfect. That sounds good. Well, so good to see everyone here today. Really excited about this session with Elon from Charity to talk about all things donor advised funds. I know it is a huge question that we've gotten from a lot of our clients, especially as we come up on end of year, on DAF Day in October. So really, really excited to have Elon here to chat more about what DAFs are, the benefits for nonprofits, and really like how you can incorporate it into your fundraising strategy for end of year. So we have a pretty kind of straightforward presentation today, but really want to make this interactive and as helpful for you all as possible. So if there are questions that you have throughout this, please throw them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll get through those as we go through the presentation. So if something's come up with your organization that you have a question on, if there is a mystery that your team has around DAFs, please throw those in the chat and we will go through those throughout the presentation, but really want this to be as interactive and helpful for you all as possible. So do you want to maybe throw up the slide deck that we have?
Yeah, let me put that up here for us. I'll
Perfect.
share my screen. We'll get going here.
That sounds good. Awesome. Perfect. So, again, super happy and excited to have Elon on from Chariot. My name is Bailey. I see a couple of familiar faces in here, but I am our partnerships and integrations manager here at the Giving Block. So, work a lot with Elon on our Chariot integration that we have so that our clients can enable DAF Pay for accepting donor advised funds on the Giving Block. So, really excited to be here for this presentation and share more with you about all the exciting things coming with end of year.
Amazing. Yeah, and it's thanks everyone for joining us today. My name's Elon Packin. I lead our partnerships team at Chariot. So that's all the work we do with our integration partners, like the Giving Block and dozens of others, and also the work we do with our nonprofits in direct conversation. There's over 50,000 organizations already accepting digital DAF gifts through Chariot's technology, and dozens of DAFs sending payments using Chariot. So happy to share some of what we've been hearing and learning, especially as organizations get geared up for year end.
Awesome. And yeah, again, just a really kind of brief agenda on what we have planned for today. Again, want this to be as interactive and helpful for you all as possible. So Elon will get a little bit into understanding DAFs, kind of what's the 101 of what to know about donor advised funds. We'll share a little bit about how DAF Pay works on the Giving Block, so how you can add donor advised funds in with crypto, stock, credit cards with the Giving Block, and then really like get into proactive DAF strategy. I think that's one of the key things we really want you all to take away from it is as we get into end of year and your fundraising strategy for this crazy time that we have coming up, like how do you really incorporate DAFs into that talking about DAF Day, which is going to be a really exciting event this year, and then just some takeaways and Q&As. But again, if you have questions throughout the session, please throw them in the Q&A so we can make sure we get to all of them, but we'll go ahead and answer those throughout the session as well.
Yeah, I think that'll be great, Bailey, that we can just kind of take questions from the Q&A or engage in the chat as we go here to make this super responsive and
Yeah.
kind of engaging throughout, not just waiting for the end. But I think just in this agenda, we'll save most of the time for the back half, which is going to be
Yeah.
that DAF strategy heading into year end, and then also the Q&A.
Perfect. Love it.
So just again, to give everyone a sense for who we are at Chariot, we basically are building the network for DAF giving. And so that really starts with our technology. DAF Pay is the only DAF payment option on the market that lets someone use their DAF online digitally to pay a nonprofit. We also power Chariot disbursements for just fast, easy, and safe payments from DAF providers to nonprofits, receiving those electronically. And then in addition to our technology, we do a lot of work around education, amazing webinars like these, trainings, conferences, research reports. We're going to pull some of those insights into this conversation today. And then, of course, promotion of just donor advice fund generally, but also about for nonprofits, how to engage in DAFs, and of course, DAF Day, which will be a big focus of the second half of the presentation. But really thinking about how do you get set up for October 9th. And, maybe it's like 12 weeks now. It's coming up real fast.
So fast.
So make sure everyone feels ready to go.
Awesome. And then just again, quick about the giving block. So we are a platform that's really designed to help nonprofits fundraise non-cash assets more effectively. Really, not only how do you find donors within your network, but how do you really actively fundraise crypto, stock, and then donor advised funds with our partnership with Chariot. So we have a solution that nonprofits can use to easily accept crypto, stock, donor advised fund gifts through their nonprofits, and really have fundraising strategy as well to empower our clients on how do you reach these donors, and are super excited to have awesome partnerships with platforms like Chariot to really assist our nonprofits in doing that. So to get kind of set the stage for things, we just have a quick poll for everyone that we would love to see how you are feeling about your donor advised fund strategy heading into end of year. So if you want to answer this poll, really how confident are you in your DAF strategy heading into end of year? So 1, not confident at all, really feel like we need some advice and insight, and 5, feeling extremely confident, we're ready to go for end of year. So if you want to go ahead and put in your answers, they're all anonymous. So just kind of how you're feeling about end of year. I think that'll be great for us to gauge the session going forward.
Yeah, and I love having these polls early on just so we can get a sense for where people are at. And that way we can tailor conversation
Yeah,
forward.
exactly. So I'll just give a couple more seconds. I see a couple more coming in here. So again, 1, not quite confident at all, really kind of maybe need some insight and strategy, and 5, feeling super confident.
And definitely the goal for today is going to be how do we move everyone up from the lower ends and get them up into some of these more 4 or 5 categories.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll just share the results here. So we've got kind of 2s and 3s. So feeling maybe a little confident, but definitely have some room to increase the confidence around DAFs. And that is definitely what our goal is going to be for today with everyone here. So thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, let's definitely see how do we get you to 4s and 5s, and we're gonna give a lot of kind of strategies you can use right off of this presentation, but also gonna direct you to a lot of resources that'll be helpful. And I realized just doing the math in my head, DAF Day is actually 8 weeks out, not 12 weeks. So these are the things we can do in the next 2 months to still capitalize on the beginning of year end. So just to kind of level set in the first few minutes of the presentation here, what's been going on in the world of DAFs? DAFs been growing tremendously. If you look at the 5-year changes, ×5 in terms of assets, ×6 in terms of grants. And you look at the sort of largest DAFs in the country, whether it's Fidelity or DAF Giving 360, up 25%, both of them. So not only is the industry at large growing, but the large providers are growing really quickly. And there's a lot of new entrants, folks like Daffy, even GoFundMe just launched their own DAF. And these platforms are also growing really quickly. So really incredible growth. So just kind of to put everyone on the same footing, what is a donor advised fund? You could think of it like a charitable wallet. Essentially, a donor makes a donation into their DAF account. They get a tax deduction up front. The money grows tax-free in their DAF account, and they can issue grants out to nonprofits over time. So kind of like an HSA, or maybe like a 401k, but that you actually use in real time to make gifts. And I think one of the things we see, like, why is it growing so much? They've been around since the 1930s, but really for donors, the three things people we hear the most is that it's super streamlined. So it's one tax receipt. You're not dealing with like a different like organizing that into the years. There's no admin or overhead costs. You can just set it up. A lot of them are free to set up at a place like Fidelity Charitable or using Daffy. The accountability is a great reason why. So if you're someone who says, I want to give, 5 or 10% of my income to charity, or maybe 1%, or I want to give $25 a month, you can kind of set up goals and contribute and pre-commit on an ongoing basis. And of course, the tax savings. There's a lot of great tax strategies when it comes to donor advised funds, putting in appreciated assets like crypto or stock, and avoiding capital gains tax and letting your assets grow tax-free. So donors are really excited about that. I think for me and a charity, what we get the most excited about when we think about donor advised funds is what happens when someone's pre-commits to giving to charity. And that's like part and parcel of what the DAF is. Because with a typical donation, folks have to make two decisions at the same time. You have to decide a budgeting decision. How much money should I give right now? And you're in the back of your head like, well, I have my credit card gives, I have my credit card, payments, I have my mortgage, I have my nanny or daycare, your daily expenses. So it's that budgeting question. And then it's the allocation. Who should I give to? Like, is this cause worthy of my support? And do I want to support this particular campaign that they're running? What Adapt does, it allows you to separate those decisions out. People can preset the budget upfront. So that's the financial question of how much assets do I want to give, how much of my income can I afford to donate to charity? And then when you get hit that with that moment of inspiration, I want to support this cause, there's no budgeting question because the money's already pre-committed. And that's what leads to people giving so much more often and frequently with their DAFs, and also changes the experience because you don't no longer have that feeling of like, oh, I'm spending money. You actually feel like I'm using money that's already been pre-spent. I'm spending someone else's money in a way, and it increases joy of giving, which makes participation much more likely. So it's a beautiful psychological change when someone sets up a DAF. Now, when we speak to organizations, one of the questions they always ask us is like, who are these DAF donors? And I think the important thing to remember with the 3 million DAF donors in the US growing, by hundreds of thousands every year, is that they're not a monolith. So they're all different income levels, there are different age brackets, there are different geographies. But what we do know about them is some like more psychological elements. So one is that they consider themselves to be smart with their finances. So they're people who want to make a smart choice when it comes to giving. They're very intentional. And so they want to make sure that they're setting things up in the right way. They're focusing on causes that they really care about and want to support in a deeper way, and very data driven. They're much more likely to be folks who are going to like Charity Navigator or GuideStar, thinking about like how effective is a nonprofit I'm supporting and wanting to maximize that. So some of the things like as we get to the second half about the strategies you might want to put in place for communications around DAF Day and year end, keep these in mind. Not segmenting based on maybe age or wealth, but rather segmenting on the language you use to talk about your organization being a smart choice, a good place that you want to give with intentionality, and some of the data of the impact that you've been having with your efforts. And in terms of the archetypes of the way people use their DAFs, another really helpful thing to understand is that there's 3 broad categories that you find DAF donors to kind of fall into. The first is someone who we call an organizer. This is basically someone who fills up their DAF and spends it every year. So it's kind of like typically an individual. They might be getting as an employee benefit from work, and they want to use it just like to streamline their giving, but they're not thinking about it as a long-term vehicle. It's more like fill it up, spend it down, annual basis, just organizing my philanthropy. The second is the optimizer. These are folks generally who are thinking about that kind of tax benefit of using a DAF account. So they will generally lump their donations, maybe get like 5 years worth of DAF giving, put it at one time, give appreciated stock or assets. And these are often a couple or multiple people using the account. And then the last category, this we call sort of the builder. This is someone who's using a DAF almost like an alternative to a private foundation. So this is, 10 or 20 years worth of donations going at one time, maybe because they had a liquidity event, they sold their business, they're, maybe a dentist or they're retiring or they're, in a startup. And a lot of times in these accounts, you have a whole family involved. So it's multi-generational. And again, this is more, you can think about it, the archetype more like a family foundation, how they approach it, but they're just using a DAF because it's a lot easier to manage, a lot more accessible and lower cost long-term. And this is kind of shifting to like beyond the psychology and who the DAF donors are and how you should think about them when you're communicating to them and engaging with them. what we hear from organizations all the time is, how do I find more DAF donors? It's almost like that's the $1 million question. Like, where are the DAF donors? How do I find them? So first is communicating to them with the right language, so the folks in your audience will identify themselves. But just some of the things that the reason why we know finding a DAF donor is so exciting and powerful for a nonprofit. The first is that when a donor switches to using a DAF, their median support doubles, but their average gift 10x's. So you have someone who's giving to a nonprofit before they're using their DAF, they're maybe giving, $100. After they're using their DAF, they're giving $1,000. On average, it's a 10x increase when they shift to using their DAF. And we also know that 26% of DAF donors actually convert from non-DAF giving. So that means that of the DAF donors you're going to find next year, 26% of them were actually people you already knew and who just hadn't been using their DAF before. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about here in this webinar is, how do we make sure that they're going to give from you from their DAF from their very first gift. And that's going to come down to the language and how you present it on your pages, that we'll get into more of the tactics sort of on the back half, but just kind of setting the scene here up front. Another thing that I want to set up front when it comes to thinking about the strategy we'll talk about later on is that the vast majority of DAF gifts are not major gifts. So this is something that we hear a lot, is that, oh, DAF gifts are only talking about, 5, 6, 7-figure gifts coming to the organization. Where in reality, this is from the DAF fundraising report, 69% of DAF gifts were less than $1,000. 92% were less than $5,000. So the vast majority of the gifts that are coming from donor advised funds are actually would be considered part of like your general appeals, your digital marketing strategy. We're talking about $100, $500, $1,000 gifts being the majority of the gifts that come out of DAF accounts. The other insight that I want to highlight here up front before we shift over to more of the tactical strategies is just the opportunity that DAF giving continues to represent. When you look at the DAF revenue growth versus non-DAF revenue growth for the nonprofits here, this was like 100 million data points. The DAF revenue growth you see year over year is 9%, 15%, 30%, kind of tying back to what I showed in that first slide. It's just accelerating with the overall kind of, I don't want to say takeover, but just like the broad expansion of DAFs in the philanthropic ecosystem. Whereas non-DAF revenue, basically flat or declining for the organizations. And so when we think about all the headwinds, whether it's the government or whether it's, just different macroeconomic factors, DAFs continue to be a bright spot and an opportunity. And that's what we want to make sure everyone in this webinar feels sort of prepared and excited for to capture as we head into, the rest of Q3 and Q4. So I'm going to switch here. I'm going to pass it over to Bailey to show you a little bit more about how the Giving Block and DAF Pay have partnered and what it looks like to have digital DAF payments using the Giving Block. But I did want to highlight here, this is the DAF fundraising report I was just referencing. This webinar, we're going to be kind of giving you little teasers or some of the most important insights or things that we've kind of taken out of these different resources. But anyone who wants to access it, it's free to get a digital copy. So just want to make that available here as well.
Awesome. Amazing. Yeah. Highly recommend checking out the incredible DAF report that Chariot put together. We will send it out as a follow-up along with the recording for this. So don't worry if you scanned it and then lose the link, we will send that as a follow-up, but just really incredible insight in that about DAF donors, their thoughts behind giving, and really some strategies for nonprofits. So highly recommend checking that out. So kind of next, we wanted to just, let me replace my current share, allow, there we go.
I think if there's any questions on just that whole kind of initial setup for this conversation, feel free to put them in the Q&A. We'll happy to answer them. Could go deeper on any one of those things if we want to keep it light, so we can talk more strategy at the end. But yeah, there's a lot more behind some of those kind of high level intros that I was giving out just then.
Yeah. And now kind of just to give you all an idea of how this can look for your donors, because Chariot has really made it as easy as possible for donors to give from their DAF. Wanted to share just a quick kind of demo of how it works within the Giving Blocks platform. So what's really exciting is now, through the Giving Block, you can have your crypto, stock, and donor advised funds all in one place. So really those donors that are going to be giving major gifts from maybe places that are a little less traditional than credit card, but much higher volume, they can see that all in one place. So when a donor goes ahead to give with DAF Pay, they will click this button here, and then it pops up the DAF Pay flow, which is powered by Chariot. One thing that is super cool about what their team has built out is that the donor can actually log in directly to their DAF all within their flow. So they're never having to leave your webpage, trying to remember what your EIN number is, find the right org. Everything is as easy as possible for the donor. So they select what donor advised fund they're going to give from. So let's just say I'm going to do Fidelity Charitable, for example. They're entering their username and password that they would use on Fidelity. So again, never having to leave your organization's webpage, which I think is such an awesome experience. Oops, I probably typed nothing like typing when people are watching you as well.
And trying to explain at the same time.
So then they'll go ahead and kind of type in their information. And you can see here, they can see exactly how much they have in their DAF account. So maybe for those donors that have had their funds build up over time, it's been a while since they give, they're really incentivized to give your organization more by seeing their balance and being able to boost their gift here. So they're going to go ahead and enter in their donation amount. And then you'll see that they can go ahead and then provide all their information, which you do get access to. I think that's another great benefit of what Chariot has built out with DAFPay is that how many times I know I was in the nonprofit world before this. Do you have a donor that's like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and send you money for my DAF. And then you're waiting like 8, 12 weeks. You never see a check come in the mail. You have no idea if they actually initiated the grant or not. So this gives your nonprofit really access to that donor information that is so important for donor cultivation, but B, visibility into the DAF gifts that you are receiving. I'm going to hit this so no one has to watch me type. You'll see that they can receive a grant confirmation email, and they also can cover the transaction fees. And then that's it. So then Chariot and their integration with DAFPay takes care of the rest. There's nothing else for the donor to do. And then you get those funds directly from the DAF provider or through Chariot distributions, which is another really exciting feature that they have set up. So again, you can see super easy for the donor. If we want to go back to the deck,
Yeah.
Elon, we can kind of
Yes.
go through some more of the benefits there. But again, you can find more DAF donors from having this directly on your webpage. I know, from nonprofits, like how awesome would it be if we have a way to get major gifts really easily online? This is a great way to do that. It allows you to convert donors for larger gifts, capture the data, which I know is such a huge thing. And then you can immediately steward them. So again, you're not having to wait till you get that check in the mail. You have the option to really immediately start acknowledging and stewarding that relationship. So I have a DAF myself, and I'm just such a fan of this platform and what they build out because it makes it so easy to give and also gives nonprofits just so much more visibility. So hopefully this gives you all a little insight on how the process works. But from with that, we're going to kind of get into the good stuff. So now that you know how you can have it on your website, how you can share it with donors, how do you really proactively do that outreach? So I'm going to pass it back to Elon.
Yeah, no, amazing, Bailey. And we're super proud of our integrations. Obviously, that's something I spent a lot of time doing. The Giving Block integration is super smooth. And when you think about your holistic DAF strategy and bringing it into this, just like how do you make it easier for people to give DAF wherever they might give? Having it through whatever sort of any platform you're using is definitely the gold standard. So super exciting. Now we're going to talk into the DAF strategy, and I'm going to call back a lot of the data points that I kind of gave in the beginning. And you'll see how that filters into the strategy as we're going to show it here in the second half of the conversation. So the very first thing I want to call out, especially when people hear this for the first time, is that the number one most important thing for a good DAF strategy is having a committed and empowered DAF champion. And something to talk about internally here at Charity, like we should get stickers that just says DAF champion. If we do, Bailey, I'll send you one. Because it's so important for a nonprofit to have that DAF champion internally. That's what's going to move the needle. And what we found through all the years we've been doing this work is that DAF champions come from all departments. And so a lot of times it's like, oh, like that has to be our plan giving person. That has to be our alternative ways to give person. But this is just a handful of people from our advisory council. These are all the DAF champions in their organizations. And we see here, you got a CFO, you have a director of development IT systems, you have a director of development and digital technology, you have peer-to-peer fundraising, you have SVP of marketing, and you have, of course, planned giving, major gifts. All departments can be in it. It's really not a function of job title because donor advised funds touches everyone in the organization when it comes to the fundraising and associated operations. What we do know is like these are the most important characteristics of someone who can become a DAF champion. The first is that they're interested, having a deep personal interest in the DAF opportunity. The fact that you're here and joining this webinar is a very good sort of initial sign. The second thing that they need to do is find that they have support. So someone who can get or have buy-in from leadership, from their from kind of more senior folks in the organization. That's really important in your DAF champion. The third is being collaborative. So someone who has the ability to coordinate across teams and departments, not just someone who kind of gets stuck in a silo. And the fourth is that natural inquisitivity, because you're going to need to not only take what you learn through your interest, but ask the right questions internally and bring those back to kind of what you're learning and tie it together to make sure that you can set everything up properly for your organization to sort of capture the opportunity. So I think that's just one key takeaway here, is just understanding either whether you should be the DAF champion of your organization or if there's someone else, and kind of helping them realize that that's a role that they can play in this process. So how do we actually set up a strategy heading into year end to find and engage DAF donors? And of course, finding and engaging means not just the communications, but also then the larger gifts and the ongoing stewardship. So what does it actually look like? We have kind of A, B, C, D here. So A, reminding them. And then we're going to show some examples and talk about what does good DAF marketing and communications look like. B is that stewardship. And the key piece of the stewardship actually ends up being the DAF giving data. So we'll talk about some of the issues with data that we see and ways to resolve that. The third is, how do you make new DAF donors? Some of the DAF education that's important both for your staff and then for your staff to then be able to communicate with the donors that you're talking to. And the fourth is about just making it easy, having the right technology in place to turn every opportunity into a converted donation. So why don't we dive in here? So the first around DAF marketing and comms, I think one of the key things to think about is unsiloing the DAF marketing. So if your organization thinks that donor advised funds sits in one part of your organization, if it just sits in planned giving, let's say, it just sits in alternative ways to give, we often find that a lot of the different channels where DAF giving is relevant get overlooked. And so that's one thing you want to make sure to be avoiding. And kind of laid out the different examples here. One is email comms, having a very simple click here to give with your donor advised fund. This can take you to any place where you have donor advised fund giving on your website, whether it's your main donate form, a DAF ways to give page, or somewhere else. The next is direct mail. So if you're doing any direct mail as you head into year end, using a QR code is really best practice. And saying something like scan the QR code to give with your donor advised fund, that ends up being a really kind of just high powered way to make sure your donors are seeing the DAF opportunity. The third is, of course, your website. So making sure that DAFs are clearly laid out on your ways to give page, and you're writing, donor advised fund and making it like, just if someone's navigating on your website, it's very easy to find. So those are kind of just the first three. The second three to think through as you go through your checklist is your donation forms. So you want to make sure that the donation forms have a DAF ways to give available, or at least a call out of how to get to a DAF ways to give. The next is if you do any live events. And I took a QR code here. I took an image here from one of our partners at LA Cancer Challenge, how they kind of had a flyer at their live event with the QR code there that people could scan. And basically really explicitly saying, scan the QR code to support with your donor advised fund. And then the last piece is running specific DAF campaigns. And that's going to be something, as we talk about DAF Day, which I'm going to shift to in a second here, is a really big opportunity of not only engaging your current DAF donors, but also doing a broader outreach to see who else in your network might have a DAF. Everything I listed in the first 5 of these slide items here are communications that are relevant to your full donor population. And one of the big things to avoid doing is siloing the DAF conversation to just people who've already identified they have a DAF to you. You need to broaden the aperture and be talking about, hey, do you have a donor advised fund? Or if you have a donor advised fund, give here to your entire audience, so that then you'll find the people, that 26% that we spoke about before, who are probably giving to you already, but aren't yet giving with their DAF. So they'll switch to their DAF and you get that 10x uplift benefit on average. So that's a big piece of what you're trying to do here with the communications and the campaigns you're running. Now, as we've been alluding to this entire time, DAF Day is coming up on October 9th. It's the largest giving day for donor advised funds of the year. It's basically like the Giving Tuesday, but just exclusively focused on donor advised fund giving. And the best way to engage with DAF Day is to get your organization verified. And once you're verified, that's going to unlock a toolkit that's going to have a lot of resources. I drew from that for this conversation, but also you can get the full toolkit there. and trainings. Like, this is kind of a high level webinar, but we have webinars as part of DAF Day that just go in much more depth, every little piece of that stack, some of the things I'm going to talk to here at a high level. And you can also invite the right teammates. So when we have a data webinar, inviting your data team. When we have a peer-to-peer fundraising webinar, inviting the peer-to-peer team, or planned giving, inviting the planned giving team. So it's a good sort of like central hub for you to kind of get your organization engaged. And any eligible nonprofit can participate. It's free to participate. And we try to make it really easy with our partners. People invest a lot in making these tools and toolkits just broadly accessible. So to highlight just some of the things we've seen in DAF Day, some of the organizations, this is just a case study from Susan G. Komen last year. They raised, as part of DAF Day, $267,000 in support from their DAF fundraising team on DAF Day. So pretty incredible. There's 174 gifts, and one of the gifts was $88,000. And honestly, until last, or maybe 2 weeks ago, I thought that was the largest DAF Day gift that happened. And then I was at a conference at Bridge, and I heard from Planned Parenthood, they got $1 million DAF Day gift last year. $1 million DAF Day gift. So obviously that's incredible. And that's the kind of thing that, you just need to catch that one donor in the right moment and say, it's DAF Day. Do you want to get engaged? Can you support organization? This is the impact that we're having. And those kind of gifts come out of the woodwork. So it was super incredible to see. I wanted to pull out an example of a flyer. This is actually one of the flyers I'm going to send out this year for DAF Day. You see here, like, they really lead on best practices, smart giving, life-saving impact. So kind of playing on the DAF sort of donor psychology that, like, you think you're smart, how you approach philanthropy. And it's kind of like obviously the immediacy of the pain point, their mission's importance with breast cancer. One other thing I want to call out on this flyer that they did really well, obviously the emotional feel of the picture, but also this kind of, they didn't do the QR code on this part. I think the back of the flyer actually does have the QR code, or this mailer, but they also have this kind of like vanity URL, komen.org/DAF. This is such a good Brex practice. It's so easy, not only for your team to everyone know, like if anyone talks about DAFs, just send them to komen.org/DAF. But also then, like, on a flyer, someone wants to search on their phone or in their browser. So thinking about that vanity URL for where you have your DAF giving ends up being really high kind of leverage too. And here's the toolkit that I was referencing. So you can kind of download it here if you scan this QR code. And some of the pieces that it has in there are just like a getting ready overview, website readiness guidelines, donor educational resources, marketing and PR resources, social media, email, phone, SMS, all sorts of like templates. So I'm not going to go through every single example on this short webinar today, but I wanted to kind of give you a teaser for some of the strategy insights and the sort of types of assets and things, examples that are there. And those are all, again, free to access to any organization that gets verified ahead of DAF Day. So putting this here for another second, just making sure anyone who wants it can kind of scan the QR code and access it. And also, if you just go to dafday.com, you can access it through the website as well. So I'll just put that in the chat actually quickly, dafday.com. If you want to, you'll see all the resources and information there as well. So the second thing, as we move past the kind of marketing and communications, the next big thing is around the DAF data. And the DAF data is such a critical piece because it is going to make sure you're having good compliance. This is increasingly important because for your public benefit tests, you actually really need to be making sure that you have hard and soft credit being done properly. So you don't have too much of your gifts coming from a single DAF provider. So having the right data structure is going to help your compliance. I put improved stewardship in the middle. That's like by and large the most important thing. Like the fact that you can segment and engage these high value donors and you know who actually is using a DAF to give and where's their noise or where's their bad data structures that's confusing things. And of course, all that's going to lead to increased digital DAF revenue because the data is sort of like that engine that informs your team. They'll then inform the marketing and communication strategy that you're putting in place. So as we think about data, I took just 8 highlights that we had in the DAF fundraising report and kind of laid it out here. We'll walk through these real quick, but some of these things I find organizations don't realize are like really good signal that probably something is not right in your data. So the first is flagging actual DAF providers. So you want to make sure you're excluding things like crowdfunding, employee matching, payroll giving, corporate gifts, QCDs. In the actual DAF fundraising report, we listed out a lot of common examples of each of those categories that you can literally just have your data team look for and make sure, oh, we're not tagging this as a DAF provider, and we're correctly tagging it as some kind of other platform or sort of third-party payer. The second is making sure you're hard coding the DAF provider, not the donor. Now, there is a little bit of personal preference in this, but really the best practice is hard coding the DAF provider because that is the person who actually made the gift to you. Fidelity Charitable is the donor of record, but then you want to make sure that you're self-crediting the individual properly, so that you can do the stewardship of the donor, but your kind of hard crediting is going to the DAF provider. The third is making sure that you're including the individual donor. So this is often left out entirely when the information is limited. So make sure you're kind of tagging it back to who the donor is and not just the fund name if it's available. We'll talk about how do you actually get more donor name and email like Bailey showed you on the giving block through DAF Pay, as opposed to just getting things like a fund name or just anonymous gifts. Another big piece is making sure that all DAF providers have one central record. We see this all the time that people have 4 different instances of different DAFs, maybe different spelling, or you have, Schwab Charitable, but you also have DAF Giving 360 and you haven't merged those records, or small spelling mistakes. So making sure that when you look at the full list, you're merging and keeping it tight on the providers you have. Number 5, record the underlying DAF provider. So making sure that you're not getting the processor. DAFs, they're now sending gifts through intermediaries of sorts. So like you might have gifts coming through PayPal grants, PayPal giving funds. But in reality, that's a gift from Vanguard Charitable, let's say. So just making sure you're recording who the actual DAF is and not the processor or financial advisor. If you are getting anonymous gifts, making separate instances for the anonymous records, you might find in the future you can actually tie back the gift, especially if you see you're getting the same anonymous gift from the same DAF provider at the same amount on a consistent basis. It might actually be a recurring gift, and then like just making sure there's at least their own record lets you have a better view on like what's really happening and how many different individual gifts you're getting, as opposed to like it all coming from one unique record. Number 7, getting the gift data entered as initiation. So knowing when the gift is initiated, making sure you're tracking that. And number 8, just the no tax receipts. DAFs got the tax receipt, the donor got the tax receipt when they funded their DAF. So you really want to make sure you're not sending tax receipts to the donor. And even more importantly, definitely don't want to be sending tax receipts back to the DAF provider. So we've seen that happen too. And the DAF providers are like, what is going on here? So that's a big kind of thing you want to be avoiding. I do see a question here. I want to maybe pause here and answer this question. This is from Katie. Katie, thanks for the question here. This is great. Are the large institutions that host DAFs, Fidelity, DAF Giving 360, et cetera, participating in and promoting DAF Day with their clients, or is DAF Day mostly being driven by nonprofits with their existing donors? It's a great question. There's a number of DAF providers that are promoting DAF Day very actively. So you have like DAFI, Dallas Jewish Community Foundation. We've been talking to the National Philanthropic Trust, a whole host of them. They're very excited. They want their donors to be using their DAFs. So it is beyond just the nonprofits. You also have a lot of like financial advisors, fundraising platforms like the Giving Block or like Chariot. So it really is kind of like a industry-wide sort of day that's being galvanized beyond just the nonprofit communications. But what I will say is you want to make sure that your nonprofit is part of the conversation on that day, because your donors are going to be hearing about it from a lot of different places. And if you're not on the DAF Day website as verified, or if you're not sending out a communication saying, hey, we accept DAF gifts, please support us with your DAF, make that smart, intentional decision, whatever it might be, you're going to be missing out on those gifts on that day.
That's amazing. And one thing too, with that, Elon, too, I saw Katie had also posted in the chat about how their organization participated in DAF Day last year and didn't see a ton of donations on the day, but still believe that it influenced donors to give through their DAF throughout the fall too. So I'm just curious if you have kind of any like insight or data on kind of just using DAF Day really as a way to kind of kick off and if you're giving and really like remind people about using their DAFs, not only on DAF Day, but throughout the rest of the year too.
Yeah, Katie, that is such a great call out. Like it goes much beyond there's 2 pieces to that. The first is like, if you have a digital DAF payment option, you'll see the real-time initiation on the day of. Maybe you'll see the gift coming through the DAF Day website itself. But actually, you hit the nail on the head. It's not just about the gift on DAF Day. It's about kicking off your year-end giving season.
Yeah.
Reminding the donors that you accept the DAF gifts, getting them thinking about using their DAF. So that way, when it comes to Giving Tuesday, when it comes to December, you see more of those gifts. One thing we've seen across our entire network is that when organizations add DAF pay, not only does their, of course, digital DAF revenue grow, but their offline revenue also grows. And so that's like, that's the person who's getting the flyer and they have the QR code and it says, go to visit Komen.org/GF. But then like, you know what, I'll just go call my financial advisor, or like, I'm comfortable enough with the old way, I'll just do that. And so you're getting more of those gifts too, even if they're not coming and converting on your website. So really, really great point there, Katie.
It's awesome. Yeah, if anyone else here has participated in DAF Day before, would love to hear about it in the
Yeah,
chat.
definitely. Um, just to kind of wrap up as we kind of continue the second half of the strategy here, beyond communication and the data infrastructure, is going to just be thinking about the top tips for your internal teams. So one, kind of reemphasizing on the data side, DAF donors don't get a thank you. They get a thank you. Sorry, they do get a thank you. They do not get a tax receipt. So yes to stewardship, acknowledging them, thanking them, but no to the tax receipt piece. The second is that every DAF gift is worth extra research, no matter the gift size, because donors will often even use their DAF, like you saw before, 69% of gifts being less than $1,000. And so even if they give you $100 gift, if they have a DAF, it means that they have intentionally set aside money to give to charity and they've already donated it. And so that's definitely someone you want to research and start engaging and building it out more like a major giving pipeline, or a planned giving pipeline. Number three, spell out donor advised fund as well as DAF. This is a really important one because especially, as you become more of an insider in the space, you don't always want to say donor advised fund. It's a mouthful. So we are saying DAF a lot here, but a lot of donors don't know what a DAF is, or they've never heard the acronym DAF, even if they have one. And so you really want to, where you can, spell out donor advised fund, whether in your communications or on your flyers, and even like give examples. Be like, give here from donor advised fund like Fidelity Charitable and thousands of others. So that way it's just like making sure people don't think that it's not applicable to them when in fact it really is. So that's a really good one. That's a common mistake we see people make as they get more excited about DAFs and more familiar, they start moving to the shorthand. Number four, include DAFs in planned giving conversations. This is like such a good opportunity. If you're using a planned giving platform of some kind, a lot of them do have DAF pay as an integration as well. So definitely you should make sure it's enabled there. But something that is, I find maybe not, or is counterintuitive, I'm not sure, I guess, 36% of donors who have a donor advised fund don't have a family beneficiary designated, which means that, that is opportunity for your organization to be included as the beneficiary on their DAF account. And that could be a windfall, right? When their account, if anything ever happened to them and you have the opportunity for that planned gift. So have that planned giving conversation. Especially if they have a donor advised fund, ask them if they have beneficiary or if they consider making you a beneficiary. If you don't ask the donors, you're never going to get those gifts. So, and DAFs are a prime opportunity for those. And the last one is DAFs can be matched by many employee match gift programs. So if you are getting matched gifts in that follow-up, including, do you have a DAF? Like if you get a DAF, including the match gift follow-up, makes a lot of sense. So not to exclude DAFs from your match giving programs if you have anything like that going. Have you seen how are these resonating with you, Bailey? Is this kind of stuff that you see or you speak to your clients about?
100%. And I will say too, like, I think just really that education piece is so helpful about the opportunities that there are. We've even seen too, like nonprofits, if they have the opportunity for a match with like a corporate partner, about sending out like targeted emails about that match also being eligible for donor advised fund gifts. So I think it's just really about like thinking through what you see as successful, with your other fundraising methods, like, you said here, matching gifts, extra research, all of that, and really applying that to donor advised funds as well. But I will say as well, you said this earlier, but the piece about just like really calling it out and making it super clear on your website and having a dedicated page for it, that's where we've really seen at least clients that we work with have huge success when it comes to new fundraising, when it comes to DAF. So I think these are amazing tips, because I think so often we get checks in the mail from DAF, but don't always think about the additional stewardship or ways to get out of the box with it. And so I think this is such great insight for nonprofits.
Awesome. Okay, yeah. So I guess then the last but not least is the DAF giving tech. I say this for last because I know Bailey did a little bit in that demo environment. But so y'all will know right now, I don't know if you have a DAF or if you've seen what that process is like, but it's super clunky for donors today. There's so many web pages and redirects and clicks, and like at Charity, we spend so much time optimizing for every click, every like page, all the UI. DAFs aren't thinking about that at all. And so the whole process is like super broken and it creates a ton of friction, which really hurts conversion. And I felt this, like when you think about when DAFs aren't used, a lot of it is because the tech is bad in these scenarios. So the top reasons when a DAF is not used is when it's, spontaneity, or if it's an event. You see here, like, I'll switch over, like large gifts, recurring gifts, anonymous, year-end gifts. That's when DAFs are used a lot. But when it's a gift to a new organization, it's more likely not to use a DAF than to use your DAF. So think about that. Like if this is a first-time donor, if you're making it hard for them, they're much more likely not to use their DAF than to use their DAF. If it's emergency relief gift where it's like, I want to give right now, there's that hurricane or that fire or this like, this crisis happening in my community. If it's a spontaneous gift, I got an email, I got a mailer, my friend asked me, I saw an advertisement. If it's a gift for an event, like it's a paddle race, or like that was outside a luncheon and they asked me to make a donation right there and I just want to participate in that social moment. And then for small gifts under $100, where people are like, you know what, whatever, I'll just get $50 off my credit card. It's just fast, it's easy. I'll just do it this way. All these moments where people are not using their DAF, that's the opportunity for having good technology, having good systems. And this is what we've kind of seen with DAF Pay is that like when you add DAFs as a core payment option, it really changes that. And all of a sudden, those moments like, I just did a webinar with LLS, my colleague did earlier this week, and in their peer-to-peer, like their event, they raised millions of dollars more. It's $2.6 million more by adding DAF Pay to their peer-to-peer fundraising forums. So if you have the technology there, and if you can add it to each of the different campaign pages, whether it's, a main donate form, a ways to give page, a peer-to-peer page, a planned giving page, just look at your entire fundraising operation, and anywhere you're accepting credit card gifts, you want to make sure you can also accept DAF gifts as well. That's kind of like the big unlock when you have sort of like a 3-click Apple Pay style giving option available. And really what we want to do is make that increased usability. So it's all those instances I just said before, where it's peer-to-peer or crisis response or a giving day or a live event, making sure that it's really easy in all those scenarios. And we've seen the uplift there consistently across whether it's, the GoFundMe campaigns plus 5%, the crisis response or giving days or live events, just the impact it's had by unlocking DAF giving in those moments where it often historically wasn't being used.
Love.
The other piece I'll highlight there, Bailey, is just like the stewardship. Like because you now have that gift real time, not only have you raised more, but the stewardship makes a really positive cycle. So like with Michael J. Fox, I want to just call this like one little case study where they sort of add DAP giving to like a ways to give page, and then they added links to their main donate form. Then they got their data real time. So like when someone initiated gifts with DAP Pay, they got an email right away knowing, okay, Bailey just came in and gave me $1,000 gift through DAP Pay. They had their head of planned giving. They had a planned giving email sent within. Most of the time it was in like a few hours, and it was like a very one-on-one style email saying thank you. And the engagement they saw from that was insane relative to what they've seen in their other things. Over 50% response rate of donors being like, "Wow, like." Basically like saying thank you for the thank you, which I always think is so funny. It's like there's DAF donors are so used to being ignored or not getting a thank you, or like they make a gift and then it's just like, okay, now like the nonprofit has to wait weeks to receive the funds or even know what happened, and it's anonymous by accident. That like when an organization is able to be this responsive, it totally changes the relationship that the donor then has.
For sure. I still think about there was an organization that I gave to on DAF Day last year, and within like an hour, they had sent me a personalized email saying like, thanks so much for being our first DAF gift on DAF Day. And I still think about it. So it's just like, yeah, I think with DAFs, you're so used to just doing it. If you do it through your DAF provider, you never are interacting with the nonprofit's website or anything. So being able to not only do it on the nonprofit's website, but then get that personalized thank you afterwards just makes it such a more connected experience that I think really encourages additional giving from there as well.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely had that experience too, where I was just like, oh, this is so like I've
Yeah.
done both, where I like give from my portal because there's no DAF option, and then I give from the websites. And just like it's so different when you get, because the only thing you really get when you get to nonprofit is the sort of thank you and that kind of feeling like you're doing the mission, like you're supporting
Yeah,
this cause. So it's it's nice to be able to close that loop for these donors in these moments.
for sure.
And I mean, they saw tremendous success. The 69% were new donors. So I think that's another big piece, just like the new donors coming in. It's not about existing donors, it's about net new DAF donors. Really high conversion rate, nice $1,400 average gift size, which was 7 times their average gift amount otherwise. So this is the kind of thing the stewardship unlocks that plays hand in hand. When you do the communications and you have the right technology and you have the data set up so you can do the stewardship, that's where you have that full flywheel sort of playing in your advantage. So just kind of summarize before we kind of go back, if there's any more questions. This is a little checklist just to kind of wrap us up. So checklist number one, like either you need to be it or you need to find the DAF champion at your organization to engage your team. Very first step, know who's kind of leading, taking the ball here and running with it. The second is making sure that DAF content is part of your ongoing professional development so that you don't have to kind of educate every person in your team one-off as it comes up, what a DAF is or how they work. DAF Day is an amazing opportunity to do that. So you could send it internally and be like, hey, DAF Day is coming up. If you're not familiar with what a DAF is, and there's so much resources again in that DAF marketing toolkit that explains how you can explain your team and get everyone up to speed about what's going on. The third is now automating your donor communications for DAF callouts. That's everything we spoke about in that marketing strategy. Like do your mailers and emails and direct mail and your website and your donation form, do all those different scenarios, your live events. Are you putting appropriate DAF callouts there so that if someone does have a DAF donor, they know if someone does have a DAF, they know they can engage with the organization and use it in that moment. The fourth is auditing your DAF data, making sure you have clear business rules, you don't have a mess in the data structures. So that way, as you do all the work up front, you can see the impact is happening. You can see backwards and you can look forwards and understand how things are transforming for your organization. And then, of course, number 5, making sure you're galvanizing around key days like DAF Day on October 9th. Again, the biggest giving day for donor advised funds. And that, like Katie said, it's a great way to sort of kick off DAF education and fundraising as you head into Giving Tuesday and year end. Because those are, Q4 is the biggest month for donor advised fund gifts of the year. So you want to be setting up not just for October 9th, but then having a really strong end of year as well. And we'll just leave you over with some resources here. So the DAF fundraising report, a lot of the data comes from this report. It's the only report that centers the nonprofit experience. So dozens of different nonprofits participated, 100 million plus data points. And that the data rules and the common mistakes and some of the common providers, all that's in there, as well as a lot of examples from organizations, how they've activated their DAF donors. So great report. DAF Day, like we spoke about, free for organizations to sign on, get verified, participate. Go to dafday.com with the QR codes there. And then, of course, DAF Pay, the only DAF payment option. You get on the Giving Block. If you're using Giving Block, make sure you add it to your main donate forms, your peer-to-peer forms. Really just make sure it's in any checkout experience you have for donations. You want to make sure that DAF Pay or a DAF payment option is available there. And I think with that, Bailey, we have a few more minutes. This is a whirlwind of an hour, but we got through it all.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, thank you so much for that incredible presentation too. I think DAFs are such a huge opportunity for nonprofits to really tap into major gifts. And so these are just awesome strategies to really help do that as we get into end of year. So as a follow-up, we will be sending out this recording as well as all of the incredible reports and resources that Elon shared in this presentation. But if there are questions that anyone has on, your organization's approach to donor advised fund fundraising, or questions that you have, or even if you want to share your own experiences, would love to do that in the last couple of minutes that we have. But if not, we'll wrap up a few minutes early and send you on your way. But yeah, chat and Q&A is still open for anyone that wants to, ask any other questions or share more about their own donor advised fund gifts.
Yeah, don't be shy. Put in the chat if you've participated in DAF Day before, or if you haven't. We saw a lot of 2s and 3s early on in that survey. I think a lot of folks have apprehension, like that if you don't have a fully baked end-to-end comprehensive plan and strategy, that like you can't do anything. And I think another piece of advice I'd give organizations, especially if this is your first year participating in DAF Day, is like something is better than nothing.
For sure.
1% better every day. Having one email, having one kind of mailer, Especially if it's already, 8 weeks out, you haven't done anything yet, like just getting your organization verified. So you're on the DAF
Yeah.
Day website. Those small things, getting the marketing toolkit, taking the one about educating your internal team and sending it around to your staff and just being like, hey, like, DAF Day's coming up, just internal education. All those
Yeah.
things add value. Like, and you never know, just like you do one thing and then it leads to the next thing, and you don't have to do it all. I know everyone's super busy. It's end of
Yeah.
the year and there's a lot going on. So just, I think just don't be scared to take like one step forward, because that step can lead to another step. And then before you know it, you do have a bigger strategy and you are making great progress.
Yeah. I'm just curious. One thing that I was thinking about in that slide that you had shown about reasons why people weren't giving from their DAFs, with DAF Pay, do you all see more around spontaneous gifts? Because I know, at least like with my experience of it, I kind of almost view it as like a gift, a loaded gift card sometimes, right? Like I'm going to put my money into my DAF and then I have it to spend throughout the year. And so I'm just curious, when orgs are starting to really do more and have DAF Pay available, do you guys see more spontaneous gifts just with promoting it that way and having a super easy way to do it?
Why do spontaneous gifts happen? Because nonprofits do such a good job of communicating like high urgency and high
Yeah.
impact. So, people do all kinds of, let's see, I'll give a good example. Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, they're a hospital system here in New York. They do a big peer-to-peer program, but they were doing this triple match over a 2-day campaign. So they're sending out all these emails, triple match campaign, give right now. Like this, it's really obviously that's going to drive spontaneous gifts. That's going to drive high urgency gifts. The first day it went live, I was like, they were like not getting any DAF Pay gifts. And I was like, what is going on? This is so weird. Like, I know they're like sending these emails out. I'm
Yeah.
sure they have DAF donors. Like, what's happening? I clicked on the page and I realized they didn't have DAF Pay added to it. They had like
Yeah.
missed implementation. This goes back to that audit, right? They thought they're
Yep.
prepared, but they spun up a new campaign. They're doing this thing, and and DAF Pay fell off that page for that campaign.
Yeah.
I messaged them, I was like, hey, make sure to edit back. Like, this is prime time. They literally edit back immediately afterwards. Like all this gets
Great.
started coming in. So
Yeah.
I think it just goes to like, making sure you're doing those audits. But yeah, when there's time bound and urgency, that makes the big difference.
Yeah. Time bound matches. Those are such a huge way to really drive that
Um,
urgency. Because especially with DAFs, they need a little urgency every
yeah,
now.
people need urgency for sure.
Yeah.
I see we have a question from Andres in the chat. How do I get my organization verified? I do work for a nonprofit, but I'm starting my own nonprofit.
Cool.
So yeah, the best way to get verified, if you just go to dafday.com and click, it should direct you. You could get verified. It'll take you to a page to actually get your charity account. That's how could we power the verification, the compliance for DAF Day. As part of the compliance checks, if your organization is really, really new, like if you're not on like the IRS filing or you're not in GuideStar or Candid, you might take a couple months, or you might have to be required to like submit documentation explaining about your organization. But otherwise, like it's pretty seamless. You just need someone who has this sort of authority to open up the sort of financial account to receive payments, to just go through the onboarding flow. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. If you go to dafday.com, it should have instructions there. Or if you literally could just go to charity and click get started, and that's going to take you to the similar flow.
Awesome. Amazing. Great questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming today. It's my
Awesome.
pleasure, Andres. Appreciate your time. Good luck with the new nonprofit. It's excited to see
Yeah,
it.
that's amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for everyone joining today. Thank you so much, Elon, for this amazing presentation. And again, as a follow-up, we will send out this recording as well as all of the awesome resources that Elon shared about DAF Day, about DAF fundraising, and really how to get started. So we will go ahead and wrap up this webinar, wishing everyone an amazing end of year fundraising season, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Bailey. Thank you everyone for
All
coming.
right.
Have a great
Bye.
day.